Howdy everyone, let's get the show on the road. Hi, I'm Shayla and I wanted to make a video today about what it was like to live in Manhattan. I lived in Manhattan from June of 2021 to June of 2022, and I just wanted to share what that experience was like for me. Someone that wasn't living in like a penthouse with a comfy work at home job and their whole life figured out, and they don't have to leave their home and dodge human feces in the subway. So first off, how did we get here? Well, I was going to college in 2020, and then I was also a theater major, which when a panoramic happens, double yikes. So I decided the best course of action for me was to stay in my college town while I saved up money and waited for the industry to open back up. During that time, I realized that I couldn't live in the Hudson Valley anymore because of the fact that I didn't have a car. And when you don't have a car and there isn't good public transportation, things get really, really annoying and really difficult really quickly. I was working at American Eagle for a while, and it would take me an hour 25 for a trip that would take 23 minutes by car. This was not the job that I had the entire time I lived in my college town, as I then worked for a jewelry store where my boss was literally insane. But the reason I came to the conclusion that I didn't want to keep living there was just not having control over my transportation. And so that all made me realize that I had to move. And why not move to the city where there would be a lot of opportunities for me and a lot of jobs that I could take on, and if one is really bad, I can go find a new one, and transportation is not the hindrance on whether I'll take a job or not. The thing is, I had stayed in the city previously when I was thinking about where to move next, and when I had stayed here the first time, I didn't like it. I think part of that though was the fact that I was doing a summer conservatory intensive for an acting program, and it was just a lot emotionally. It was the same summer that my long-term cat died, like my childhood pet. It was just a really rough time the first time that I stayed here. It was also rough because, once again, money, but I decided that I needed to move so I could take advantage of the job market and the opportunities that the city had to provide for me. Also, I will say for the record, I didn't want to live in Manhattan. I tried to live in the outer boroughs, particularly Brooklyn, before with other people, but everyone kept backing out because living in the city is stupid expensive. And reasonably so, people would back out of the plan to move with me when the time was coming. And it got to about the last month of my lease, and I reached out to an old friend from college, and her and one of our other friends from college were looking at apartments, and their third person backed out. So I was like, can I be your new third person? And they said yes. This was also difficult though, because we all had different things we wanted in a space, and the biggest thing for one of my roommates was living in Manhattan. Since that was her deal breaker, that's what I had to do. I didn't really have an option, and I tried finding spaces with randos, but I just didn't feel comfy living with a random person, even though my one roommate ended up booking a tour, so I did have to live with a random person who did not keep up their share of housework and then tried to guilt me and our other roommate. But in the meantime, that's what happened. So I decided that I would live in Manhattan with these two girls, and we made it work, you know? But the kicker was I decided that I would take the biggest bedroom, and it was because my deal breaker was sunlight in my bedroom. The year prior, I lived in my little rat cave. I had no sunlight. I didn't want another rat cave. And I told my roommates that I would be willing to pay extra to have the bedroom with sunlight. And so I ended up paying $1,034 a month for my single bedroom in the apartment. I think our total rent was $2,800 for a 3-bedroom, and that was a pretty good price. We found other places during our search, but a lot of them either broke other people's deal breakers for the apartment, they had flex bedrooms, they had like holes at the top of single bedrooms, so like your room wasn't sealed off completely, and I did not want someone to like bring a guy home and then I can hear them going at it because their room's not sealed off because we have this random cubby hole above their bedroom. I was really not about that life. So another thing I wanted to talk about is finances, because if you're gonna live somewhere like Manhattan, you have to be able to make at least some form of money to be able to cover all your costs. My costs total ended up being $1,084 a month because that includes rent, that includes electric and Wi-Fi. And electric can sometimes be a little bit higher or lower. For that number, I had it at about $35 a month. And Wi-Fi, I think, is $18 a month. I did not have a job lined up when I decided I was going to move to Manhattan. I was literally winging it because a whole year and a bit of my life had been taken up by the panoramic, and I just wanted to move and do whatever it took to make the move work. My first job ended up being in a costume exhibit, and it was like $15 an hour, and then I got really, really lucky and had a nice COVID safety gig for about 10 months. Now, the COVID safety gig is what allowed me to pay my rent, build my savings, and do all of that jazz. I would not recommend it for a job. I don't really think it's gonna be around much longer. I know some places still have COVID safety people. I don't recommend it. Not that my company was bad, because they weren't. It's just the nature of the job. I dealt with seas and seas of assholes being a COVID safety monitor. It is like they thought I came out of the womb and I was like, goo goo gaga, I can't wait to be a COVID safety monitor when I grow up, when clearly that was not what I wanted. I was doing it for the money. And don't get me wrong, like, I made friendships with my coworkers. I miss so many of my coworkers. I met so many amazing people through that job. And also, I have so much respect for all of the ushers, the stage doormen, the front of house staff, the security, and all of the lovely actors and crew members that I met when I was a COVID safety person. I will probably make a video someday more about my COVID safety job, but it was so emotionally draining. So not only was I struggling with the adjustment of living in Manhattan, but also I was working a customer service job where I was being called a Nazi by people. And I wanted to be like, you know, tell me you've never had a real problem without telling me you've never had a real problem in your life. Because how could you compare me asking you to follow the rules of a venue with being in Nazi Germany? Like, grow up. So that was how I made my ends meet. I highly recommend saving up a ton of money before you move to Manhattan. I had probably about $5K saved when I moved here. It did not last for garbage. When you count like the $1,000-something security deposit, you count the $1,000-something rent I had to pay, on top of just like general moving fees. I bought a new bed when I moved. I'm glad I did, but it added to the general moving costs. So you have to think about if you need furniture when you move. I only moved with about 2 pieces of furniture. You have to think about what you need to buy, like curtains, or if you need kitchenware, or if you want like a couch and a coffee table and other things in your living room, if you want like a TV to hook up stuff to. So there's a lot of costs that go into moving. So I would definitely have more money saved up than what I had. Probably like $10K at least, if not more. I know before I move again upstate, I want to have at least like $20K saved before I decide to uproot my life again, but that is just me. And I'm partially making this video because I feel like there's so many people online who glorify living in New York City. And I feel like a lot of these girls who do this stuff have a lot of money, or they have a really cushy job already, or they have parents that can fund that lifestyle for them. And the truth of the matter is, you are most likely not going to be living in a high-rise, floor-to-ceiling window, beautiful ass apartment. You're most likely going to be living with roommates. You're most likely going to be living in a place that isn't perfect. Even this apartment now has its own problems. I have holes in my floor. I have baby roaches in my bathtub that like to crawl through the sink, and I need to call my landlord and tell her about it because I'm afraid to pee now. You know, wherever you live, it's gonna have problems. I have personally the landlord special in this apartment too. If you don't know what that is, go on TikTok and look up landlord special. I'm sure you'll find it. It's basically when the landlord hires painters to paint the apartment and they paint everything on the walls over with white paint. So if there's like bugs or hair or hardware, especially hardware, none of our doors in this apartment actually like close by themselves. They all have locks on them that have also been painted over. So you have to like jimmy them shut to go to bed at night. But when I leave my apartment, I can't like close my door behind me because there's no way for it to close because it won't do that. But just because of the fact that there's a lot of stuff I can't afford or there's a lot of places I can't afford doesn't mean it's not worth moving here. I know I've spent most of this video probably complaining about living in Manhattan. Now I don't live in Manhattan anymore. I live in an outer borough and I'm much happier. But it is much quieter here than it was when I lived in my old place. I feel like I can go outside on walks and voice memo friends and I can have privacy and I feel like I can be alone sometimes. So all of that is just really important to me. If you like the big hustle and bustle, the razzle dazzle, if you will, if you like a lot of noise and a lot of convenience and a lot of like busy streets, then I'm sure you'll love Manhattan. For me, it was just a means to an end of my first year living in the city. I wasn't even sure if I was going to stay past that year because of how hard my adjustment was. It probably wasn't until about 6 months in that I felt like, maybe I could stay in the city, whether it be in Manhattan or a couple outer boroughs, for another couple years so I can keep working and saving up money for the things I want to do. I didn't reach that conclusion until I really felt secure financially and until I felt like I could navigate everything. You know, there's a lot to adjust to, navigating the subway, navigating, for me, Midtown, because I worked in Midtown. I grew up in central New York, and so it was very yeehaw. Like I grew up around farms and cows and deer and nature and rednecks. So I'm very used to like a slower way of living, and living in the city, it's very, very fast paced. So it was a lot for me to adjust to in terms of just my general way of being. I used to do these like nature walks when I was in my college town where I would walk maybe like 8 miles a day, just connecting with nature. And it wasn't until I moved that I realized how much I missed that. And so when I do get the chance, I try to do little walks here and there. And it is much easier to do that living in an outer borough than it was living in Manhattan. Because at least in the outer borough I'm in now, I feel like I'm alone sometimes, where when I lived in Manhattan, I felt like I could never get a minute alone. Like every moment was a public moment. So now that I've told you all of the hard stuff about living in Manhattan, why don't we talk about some of the pros? I feel like the biggest one is the amount of convenience there is living in Manhattan. Obviously, you have a lot of access to different foods of different cultures. A lot of stuff is open later, like where I lived, there was a Little Italy. Shout out to my homies at Little Italy for knowing how much I love my fountain sodas. One night, a guy literally looked me dead in the eyes and he was like, you really like fountain soda? And I was like, yeah. Because I think I just went in to get solely a fountain soda. No pizza. I just wanted my Diet Coke. So there's plenty of places like that. Whatever you need, you can probably get it within a walking radius of you. There's no shortage of things to explore. You have like public libraries, you have museums that have free exhibits, you have parks, you have, you know, you could just do general window shopping. Maybe that's just something I like doing, but there's something just very comforting about walking around a store and looking around, especially small businesses. So there's a lot that Manhattan can really offer. Also, being in the entertainment industry, it's been really nice to connect with other people. I've been going and hanging out with friends that work in the industry. I've made more connections. There's a lot that you get to do when you live here. Also, the amount of classes. I recently just finished up a class at the Atlantic School of Acting, and it really boosted my confidence and reminded me why I love doing what I do. So I highly recommend, if you're in the city and there's stuff you like doing, even if it's not acting or like artsy, say you like yoga, or I mean, maybe is that artsy? I don't know. Or you want to like learn a skill, there's probably a class for you somewhere in the city. And I feel like that's a really important part. Like, you have access to a lot of like educational resources. You have access to people that like doing the thing you do. And like I said, the connections. I've met so many really cool people from so many different walks of life, so many different states. It's really cool to see the people that move here from like southern states or like other countries, or people that move, like my roommate is from Alaska, and I'm like, whoa, like, what? That's crazy. Like, you just don't really think about like where people are from at first. So it's been really cool to talk to people about where they've grown up and what they did before they moved here. Overall, I would say if you want to move to Manhattan, go for it. Just make sure that you're smart about it and that you're aware of the realities of living here. It might not be your Gossip Girl-esque fantasy, but it can still be a worthwhile experience. I'm happy that I moved here, no matter how many tears were involved, no matter how many nights I kept wondering how I'm gonna make this work. Through all of it, I'm glad that I moved here, because if I hadn't moved to Manhattan, I would have been wondering, you know, what if I did? What if I had moved here? What would I have done? I'm getting to live that reality, and I feel like that was really important to me. I didn't want to get older and regret not moving here. So I'm really happy that I did it. And if I can do it with very little money and like not a rich parent, I will say that my mom helped me a little bit, but my family is by no means rich. But you can do it. It just might not be glamorous, but I think it will be fun. And I think it's really important to kind of enjoy life and enjoy the journey, especially if you're young and you have time to get everything secure and settled. Why not live a little and move somewhere new and experience life in that type of place? So I think that is it, guys. That's all I really wanted to say. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you like it, you can stick around and subscribe. I don't care, you got free will, do what you want. But yeah, hopefully I'll see you around. Yeehaw! Bye.